Thank you. Well, welcome. I'm really delighted to be here. So I'm going to be speaking to you about Kubernetes-based platforms, what I title For the People, By the People, and Of the People. There we go. So just in terms of, I'm the CEO and CTO at a company called OpenCredo. We're a hands-on software development consultancy, and we've landed up sort of helping a lot of clients to build various platforms, many of them Kubernetes-based. And I've seen a lot of the trials and the tribulations that people have gone through in sort of doing this. And part of what I want to talk to you about today is some of the sort of shared experiences from that, and try and see if we can help you to also learn from that in terms of when you're trying to build Kubernetes-based platforms. But I want to start with an observation, and this is something that I've kind of seen along the way, is that in the sort of quest to push for the adoption of these innovative new platforms, we seem to have lost sight of the human innovators and the sort of communities behind it. And I think for the platforms that don't quite seem to work out, in a large part, this is due to an unhealthy focus on the cool new innovative technologies and not so much on the broader sort of human and developer experience behind it. Now, when I speak about a platform, what I'm talking about in this particular case is like an internal developer platform. So where you've got, you're trying to create, sort of speed up the opportunities for developers and delivery teams to actually produce their business applications out to the clients and to sort of empower them, make it easier for them to do that. When I speak with organizations, though, quite often they will speak to me about the fact that Kubernetes is the platform. And this is one of the things I want to really try and speak about in this talk, is that if you want to build a great platform, even if it is Kubernetes, there's a realization that actually the platform is a lot more than just Kubernetes. And we need to look at a few more broader things around it to actually make the entire platform experience work for the end users. So what's the answer? Well, we're all in IT, so we know how this works. We just need a simple Venn diagram. You know, you've got a platform, some technology, you've got to target some particular users, and then you just add in some process, and obviously you just combine that together, you find the intersection, and hopefully you have yourself a super platform. The problem, of course, is it's never quite that simple. So, and the reason for this, well, actually, I mean, whilst it's important to get the sort of technical components together, you need to really look at a lot of the other aspects that come with this. Now, if you just naively combine these things, it doesn't quite work. And why? Is because there's some complicating factors involved. So the first thing I would say is that often when people try to do this, it's not sort of realized that actually the audience that you're building the platform for is often a lot more diverse than you actually think. So there's a lot of different communities out there. They've got different skills, they've got different requirements, and all of them need to be taken into account. So if we look at who tends to build these platforms, it's often built by your platform engineers, and they will have a lot of quite deep experience in the sort of platform space. They'll know all about infrastructure as code and GitOps and all these type of things. But a common mistake that we often see with organizations trying to build these platforms is that they expect that the people they're building it for also understand these same concepts. And so the abstraction level doesn't actually land up at the right level. So for example, you might have sort of people saying, well, here's a Helm file or some YAML file, and you need to just put your bits and pieces in here, and you'll be able to, your platform will work. But developers often need a higher level of abstraction rather than just working with the low-level Kubernetes setup. So if we think, well, who are the people that are actually going to be using this platform? The developers are key. They are a key target that we're after. But it's not only them. We also need to think about, for example, the data analysts and the data scientists. So they also need to use various aspects of the platform, and they come with a completely different set of requirements. So they've got to worry about things like data lineage, versioning their data, and also doing more experimentation, which is different. But they're also not the only ones. There's also what I would call the often forgotten and sometimes misunderstood community group, which is the leadership and governance. So obviously, leadership and governments, they're not going to be using the platform in the same way that your developers are. They're not going to be spinning, sort of clusters and things up. But they do want to understand, have I managed to get a return on my investment? I've put a lot of money into this. Are my teams actually able to release as fast as the promise is? So that's great. So we've got, all right, there's a whole bunch of different sort of communities that we need to look after. But the key thing that is really the challenge, I think, is that many people believe that building a platform can be solved by using technology alone. And Kubernetes is often, as I say, touted as the main platform. Now, whilst the good technical implementation is really important, and this includes automating your code and also creating the right levels of abstraction, it's not enough generally. And typically, what we've seen is many clients, they've gone and they've created wonderful platforms and they're technically very good, but when they give them to the teams, they actually don't use them, and it becomes a bit of a white elephant. And this, I also believe, for those of you who've seen the movie Field of Dreams by Kevin Costner, which is maybe dating me a little bit, but there's an often misquoted principle in there, which is, if you build it, they will come. And I see this quite often, is that people build these platforms and it just doesn't happen. And this is because you need more than just technology to be able to get people and the teams to actually embrace the system, embrace your platform. You need to be quite purposeful about driving and shifting your communities further to the left and to be able to kind of use your platform. So how do we do this? This is often done by rethinking actually how some of the teams interact with the platform, but also with each other. And it's not static, so the teams themselves will change, and so you need to take that into account as well. Now, thirdly, I would say that when these platforms are being built, quite often there's a case of, all right, well, we've built this, we've set up our processes and our sort of governance, and now people are just going to use the platform. But the platforms are generally not static. And when you think about this, it's not just from the requirements point of view. So it's not just the technology that might need to change. You might need to use different tech. There's also the teams and the skills in the teams themselves that are going to change over time. So, for example, if you might have a team that has just kind of started out. Maybe they've been brought in, they've had from a more legacy sort of code base. They're going to have quite a different set of skills to somebody that's been doing this for a while. And if you impose just one single way of having processes on top of that, it can be quite problematic. So what I've sometimes seen work well in this sort of area is to say, well, okay, maybe we will constrain some of the teams that are really new to this. They can't fiddle with as many knobs as somebody that's kind of been doing this for a while. And those processes need to evolve as time actually goes along. But my key point that I really want to kind of make with this is that if you want to build a good platform, you need to look at this as a socio-technical challenge. Now, that's quite a big word, but all I really mean here is that you want to take both the technical aspects that you're looking at and also the social aspects and solve that at the same time and recognize that they're actually interdependent. So how do we do this? So instead of, what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with looking at what I've observed as some of the key successful characteristics of platform endeavors that have done really well. So what does good look like? And then have a look at, okay, let's step back and let's have a look at what are the principles that can be used to actually try and move us in that direction and hopefully get one or two sort of examples along the way. So the first really successful characteristic of a good platform initiative is that very clear boundaries and responsibilities have been established. So it's really clear to people what is the responsibility of the platform and what is the responsibility of the teams that are actually using it. And if you don't do this, what tends to happen is that you just kind of land up in a little bit of a blame game. So the type of behavior you'll see is a development team who might say, oh, you know, something's gone wrong and it's the platform's fault, so we'll raise a ticket for the platform team. And then the platform team say, no, you haven't looked at the logs, so go and look at the logs and then come back and, you know, we can talk. But when there's not these clear lines, that becomes quite problematic. Following this, however, I would say one of the key desires of users of the platform, and one of the really successful characteristics, is that it needs to be self-service. Ideally automated, and this is because users and teams, it's much easier for them when they can just service the sort of functionality that they need. They can go as fast or as slow as they want, and they basically take control of themselves, of their own destiny. Now, this picture might look a little bit weird, and it's slightly out with maybe the rest of my talk, but I actually generated it for those of you who've seen DALL-E. It's an AI art generator. So I put in self-service machine in a cartoon pop-out style, and that's what it came up with. So I couldn't really find the perfect sort of picture. So this is my effort to do self-service myself. I just put the stuff in, and out it popped. My marketing team may not think it quite fits, but in this case, I think it's all right. But one of the third things that really successful platform teams and endeavors have is that the platform is really kind of flexible and it's evolvable. So obviously the platform needs to be opinionated enough so that it can keep order. You've got to have some sort of semblance of control. But it does need to be flexible and adaptable so that it can cater for the different communities that are using it. And this includes deviating sometimes and doing things completely different. So by definition, you can't have a one-size-fits-all. And finally, and this is really important, good platform initiatives are reliable. So if you're going to build a platform for your organization and you say to them, we're going to allow you to do sort of auto-scaling, you just need to put these pieces in or configuration in and it'll work, you better make sure that it does. Because it doesn't matter how much you've wooed them and you've tried to kind of get them onto your platform, if it doesn't actually work, the teams will just get frustrated, they will lose confidence in you and management as well. And again, the whole thing starts sort of imploding. So these are, as I say, this is what success generally looks like, these characteristics when platform initiatives go well. So how do we get there? Now, instead of me just telling you should do X and Y and all of these type of things, what I've found is a much better way to look at this is to use what I call some principles. In this case, I would suggest 4 community-driven principles that you can use to try and adapt the approach that you're taking to actually build your platform out. Now, you may have slightly different ones yourself, and I'll go into some sort of examples, but I would argue if you do this, that you should get to a good result. So just a note, there's only so much I'm going to be able to go into on this talk, so if you want a slightly longer discussion on this particular area, I have another talk which is on platform engineering as a community service, which you can get some of the more details on. But the first principle that's really important is to make sure that whatever you do, you make teams independent and not dependent on you as a platform team. So obviously the platform will need to be dependent on you the people will need to be dependent on the platform to a certain degree because they've got to use it. But what you don't want is for them to have to sort of personally have you as a team intervene in order to do things. So what we're aiming for here is empowerment. So what are the type of things that you can actually do to make this happen? So there's a few things here, but the ones that I want to concentrate on at first is something called defining a platform contract. So this is very much like something called the AWS shared responsibility model. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be a document that you have. But it really defines what's the platform responsibility, what's the team responsibility. So a good example here would be in the security space. So you might say, platform team is responsible for securing the cluster and if there's EKS or whatever. but actually it's the team's responsibility to scan your images and make sure they're not vulnerable for CVEs and things like that. As a platform team, you may say, actually, we will provide the service to do the scanning, but it's the team's responsibility to do that. And in a completely different organization, they may say, well, actually, part of the platform's contract is we're going to give you the pipeline. We're going to have points where you have to sort of make use of things. And there is a scanning function. And if you don't get past that, you don't get into production. So the point, though, is that it's very clear who's doing what, where. And obviously, doing this through automation is key. Second principle is very much around promoting freedom within boundaries over just allowing anything to go. So if you just allow anything on the platform, it often ends up being a little bit of a free-for-all. So what you want to do is rather give people choice. So the sort of areas where you can do this is a variety of things, but one of the things that we've seen work quite well is around things like technology stacks. So you might say, you can use a Java Spring Boot setup or a Node.js setup or whatever, but you've got to choose between these options. You can't just have absolutely anything. So this gives you the sort of semblance of control, including on the sort of on various sort of levels, but it still allows people to have choice in terms of what they do. But you don't just leave people and say, all right, well, off you go and build your app. You always want to try and bring people closer to the platform and make it easier for them to get onboarded. So some of the things that you can do technically to help out is to sort of do things like reference implementations and templates to help them get on board. Also, yeah, we'll leave that there. So the third one is to be a role model and walk the talk. So what do I mean by this? Just really that you need to be able to practice what you preach and also eat your own dog food. So if, for example, you are providing the sort of tooling to allow people to spin up their infrastructure, you should be using that same tooling on yourself so that you can work out what some of the problems are, so that you can demonstrate what good looks like to people. And at the same time, it also helps to make the platform reliable because you will work out a lot of those issues as you actually kind of go along. The other thing is to realize that actually you are, as a platform team or the people looking after that, you are the professional services within your organization. You can't call on Amazon or somebody to come and tell you this is how our platform should work, because it's going to be your job to go into the teams and help them understand what are the unique ways that this needs to be done for you. And if this is not recognized by leadership and management, that in itself can be challenging because it's going to happen anyway. People need the platform team, et cetera, to be able to help them out on this. And if you don't, it just ends up becoming a shadow activity and it kind of goes into the background and you end up with really sort of overworked teams. So the fourth and final principle here is really to, as I say, respect and recognize that there's differences and you need to cater for these differently. So if you think about the leadership sort of group, they will need things like dashboards in order to get the information that they need. Technically, there's going to be changes. But the area I want to just briefly mention is around the teams and the structures of the teams. So there's a really fantastic book by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pace, and it's called Team Topologies. And I really highly recommend that people have a look at this because it's a fantastic way to, it explains how you can design your teams in order for different contexts that you find yourself in. And if we have a look at, what's happening in terms of the platform space here, teams are changing all the times, the modes that they interact is different, and this provides a great framework to be able to have a look at that. So one of the sort of models that they've got there is a platform team, which operates in as a service model. And we've seen this work really well in many of the clients that we work with, where we might start off with a platform team, but that actually then gets maybe subsumed, or it gets broken down into a few more in order to be a little bit more specific. But then you've got different modes where you might have to take somebody and actually put them in one of the development teams to help them get up to speed. And it talks about all these various different options that you have. So, in summary, if you're looking to build your Kubernetes-based platforms, and you want it for the people, by the people, of the people, I would suggest that you need to start with a solid foundation. And this includes, I didn't mention it before, but making sure that you get high-level buy-in, and that's from your C-suite. So it's not just the technologies that are needed, there's also the process, the teams that need to change. And if you don't have high-level buy-in from management, that's going to be problematic because you're not going to be able to make those changes. But provided you've got that, you've got enough technical expertise as well to sort of journey safely, I would argue if you are guided by these sort of community-driven principles, so making teams independent of you, making sure that you promote freedom within the boundaries, you are a role model, you walk the talk, and that you also respect and recognize the community differences, you aim for those successful characteristics, you will land up creating a great Kubernetes-based platform that is for the people, by the people, and of the people. Thank you.